Meet Mrs. McShoogle. Her memoir bears no resemblance whatsoever to real life. It is 100% fiction and fabrication, or, to put it bluntly, complete codswallop. Indeed, none of the public figures named will recognise one grain of truth in her farcical fibs and fantasies. This satirical monologue does not represent the views or actions of any person, living or dead.
Mrs. McShoogle, Scotland's second finest actress.
You couldn't make it up, but she just did. Episode 4. A Sky Full of Stars.
I take the privacy of my guests very seriously. You have to in a small town like Strathbogie. You would not believe the curtain twitching that goes on here in Condoleezza Crescent. How Liberace could live with that level of intrusion day in, day out, I'll never know. We had the world's paparazzi camped out in the cul-de-sac when he stayed. All the glossy mags were here. Woman's Own, Woman's Realm, Woman's Weekly, rooting through my delphiniums at all hours of the day and night to catch a glimpse of him swinging naked from the flat-pack chandelier he installed on the landing. But the Candelabra King wasn't fazed. He just donned his toweling robe and shades and roller-skated past the lot of them with 2 fingers in the air. Then he'd whiz along the high street and back to collect the latest copy of smash hits. His bejewelled couture was certainly avant-garde. This was pre-Christopher Baggins, remember. But I've never known anyone take so long to get ready in the bathroom. Poor George Michael was stood outside the door for hours, clutching his wee winky. I've always been very comfortable with the human form, in spite of my Highland upbringing. I did a sport of life modelling between jobs, and I had no problem with nudity in a role if it was integral to the plot or Julie Andrews wasn't available. So why all the hullabaloo about the British remake of Charlie's Angels? Wayne's Wags. It was as if the press had never seen a pistol hidden in bikini bottoms before. At the height of the furore, David Frost had the temerity to ask me if it was just special effects. Oh, grow up, David, I said. I simply clenched the pistol in my buttocks in the privacy of my dressing room, and when the director shouted action, I parted my cheeks, whipped it out, and bam, 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 the baddie's face down on the futon. Any police officer would have done the same. I could not understand what all the fuss was about. Every day on set, I'd kept my purse and house keys squeezed between my buns. It helps to keep everything perky. And you don't leave valuables lying around the dressing room when you're sharing with someone from Emmerdale. But what people don't see is the more serious side to an actor's work. When Brad and Angelina stayed with me on one of their humanitarian missions, they picked my brain about local war zones. "Have you been to Aberfeldy?" I said. They were very grateful for the tip, and they went the following day. "I've never seen anything like it," Brad said. I warmed to them both immediately, and I learned so much, but I did have to ask them not to bang on about climate wars when I was trying to watch Countdown. I encouraged Angie to stand for president. "Only you and George, Amal and the twins can save mankind now," I said. But she felt she had enough on her plate with the National Enquirer and the endless school run. I am very proud to say I donated to Angela Merkel's election campaign. I sent her some Body Shop bath salts and a copy of Branwell Bronte's autobiography to help her relax. Ever the lady, Angela somehow found time to write a warm thank you letter by return. She said the lavender bath salts were just the job, and she found Branwell's autobiography most interesting, if a tad short. And why was every chapter called Sisters Are Doing It For Themselves? Then she asked me for my thoughts on the thorny issue of Scottish independence. "Well, where do you begin, Angela?" I replied. I always find it a toughie to explain to my guests, but I try to give both sides of the argument. On the one hand, I say, it's nice to pop to the Lake District for the weekend without the need for a full-body search. But on the other hand, Nicola Sturgeon is such a gobby wee dynamo you can't help but like her, can you? I call her the Midge, as she really gets under your skin. She is the most incandescently beautiful woman I've ever met. And I've sat next to Sally Magnuson at a Motorhead concert. She has those come-to-bed eyes, cheekbones that dwarf the average pair of shoulder blades, and the daintiest wee feet this side of William Hague. "Do a Robbie, dear," I told her. "Politicians don't change a thing. To leave a lasting legacy, do strictly." Last year, I was saddled with a block booking for the Tory party conference in Perth. I tried and tried to say no, but eventually Tory HQ sent Giles Brandreth on a charm offensive. "Think of it as charity," Giles begged me. "You will be doing it for posh people everywhere." I said, "You may wear delightful pullovers, Giles, but I don't need any lectures on charity work from the likes of you. I help out most Tuesday mornings at the Save the Royal Bank of Scotland charity shop." But night after night of his never-ending anecdotes wore me down, and I eventually gave in to that silver-plated tongue of his. And what a pavlova it turned out to be. I had MI5 checking in the bins and under the beds, and next thing I knew, they were seizing my pogo stick. A particularly sour-faced young agent told me, "We don't want Boris Johnson making an idiot of himself in front of the cameras now, do we, madam?" And before you know it, they'd sent in the full gamut of forensic scientists in white suits. It was terrifying. I had no idea what they'd found until I saw a line of them coming out of the Kazi holding the toilet brush at arm's length. Jerry Hall and I clung on to each other on the landing, thinking it had been poisoned or something. But after demanding an explanation from the chief security officer, he said the area was now safe, but the offending article had been removed, as it was so disgusting his officers refused to do their number twos in there. "Sweet Jesus," I said, "you lot would never make the SAS." I was on the point of telling them to take their booking and shove it, to think I turned down John Barrowman for this, when all of a sudden a line of limos draws up beside my wheelie bins, and out pops a very dishevelled-looking Coco the Clown. "Why, the circus is in town," I thought. But as the poor specimen walked towards me, I realised it was only Boris Johnson, followed by Theresa and Philip May. Suella Braverman refused to step out of her Bentley when I told her I didn't have such a thing as a presidential suite. "You could pitch a tent next to the recycling bins," I suggested. But she said that wasn't a lifestyle choice she ever fancied trying, and told the driver to head straight to the Ethel Palace Hotel. Theresa interjected at this point and said, "We'd love to hang around and listen to you, Sue Ellen, but we really can't be asked." I have to say, my heart melted when I saw Theresa and Philip May so very much in love. Philip was like Peppermint Patty, holding on to his wife's panties and blushing when she patted him on the head. She and I turned out to be kindred spirits. On the last day of the conference, I served her kidneys at breakfast. "These are Jeremy Corbyn's," I joked as I dished them up. You'd have heard the guffaw in Willesden Junction, and she tore into them after she'd finished hand-feeding Philip his chocolate shreddies. I complimented her on her outfit. I'd never dare to pair that tank top with those leather trousers, I said. "A lot of people have said I channel Marilyn Monroe," she said. "Do they?" I said, taking a long look at her. "I don't see it myself. Maybe a little Katie Hopkins." Thankfully, the blonde bombsite never came down to breakfast. I had warned him from the start, "Boris Johnson, unless you can say something that is honest and decent and isn't just divisive, attention-seeking drivel, I don't want you to utter a word in my house between now and Friday." "Why, I've never been so insulted in my life," he said. "Oh, I think you have," I said. Theresa made a point of thanking me as we were sitting watching The Silence of the Lambs one evening. "That silly man makes me look competent," she said. "Well, almost," I said. I can't tell you the relief when they'd finally pissed off back to Westminster. always look forward to attending Scotland's very own awards, the Tartan Tammies. Every year Denzel manages to outdo himself, and this year's ceremony was no exception, as a giant blow-up Stephanie Beecham floated above us while we walked the red carpet. I thought she looked stunning, her big shoulder pads illuminated against the night sky. But I heard a few grumbles from Jane Asher, ahead of me in the queue, that she hadn't been given the great honour of becoming a barrage balloon. Be careful what you wish for, I thought a few minutes later, when the wind got up and she was bonked on the head by a free-floating, smirking Stephanie. This year I was invited to the ceremony by J.K. Rowling, who is such fabulous company, and so generous with that super deluxe quadruple platinum credit card of hers. The pair of us were seated at table number 60 oatcake, which was some walk in heels. Ben Nevis would have been easier, J.K. said, but we had such a fun bunch at our table. I managed to wedge myself between Whoopi Goldberg and Sean Connery, and J.K. sat next to the patron saint of Scotland, Billy Connolly, and his gorgeous wife Pamela Stevenson. That woman positively radiates a certain something spelt S-E-X, and was kind enough to offer some marriage guidance to Sooty and Sue, who shared a seat at the end of the table. We were all shocked to hear just how bad things were between them. Just as we were topping up the Blue Nun, the lights began to dim, and Denzel appeared looking very dapper in a satin onesie, leather cap and matching chains. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "please welcome your hosts for the 27th Annual Tartan Tammies, the divine David Tennant and the handsome Miss Hannah Gordon." I could not believe my ears. My dear friend Hannah in Strathbogie? And she wasn't staying with me? I was incredulous, I don't mind telling you, but even I got caught up in the frenzy when she was rolled on stage wearing an R2-D2 costume. The woman looked hot. The crowd were on their feet, apart from Sean Connery, who remained seated and fumbling under his kilt in the chair beside me. Well, things are looking up, I thought. But next thing, he'd removed his underpants and he was throwing them in the air, yelling, "Love ya, Hannah Banana!" Didn't we laugh? Ever modest, Hannah looked quite overcome at the reaction and flashed her buttons, rotated her head and whistled and bleeped some unintelligible but heartfelt robotic hogwash. She hasn't changed a bit, I thought. The first half of the evening saw Tartan Tammy after Tartan Tammy going to the creme de la creme of Scottish talent. Best Scottish Drama went to the cast and crew of Taggart for the gazillionth year running, and then Best Scottish Actor went to Colin Firth, of all people. Who knew? Apparently the Academy couldn't think of any decent Scottish actors. David Tennant didn't look best pleased, you can imagine, but them's the breaks, and thankfully Colin kept his speech short. "Thank you most kindly for this honour. I may not be Scottish, but I once toured your beautiful rain-soaked country in a Volkswagen Caravannette. All my love to Colin Farrell." That kind of thing. Next up was Best Scottish Actress, which is always one of my favourites. It used to be a shoo-in for dear Molly Weir when she was alive, but now it's an open playing field, though they still nominate Molly for old time's sake. David went through the glittering nominations one by one, and Ashley Jensen, Lindsay Duncan and Alid Jones each received a polite round of applause, but we all went wild when the last nomination was none other than Charlie Dimmock. Charlie stayed with me last summer when she understudied for darling Maureen Lipman in the classic thriller L'amour et le chien. As it turned out, she got to go on quite often, as Maureen had other commitments, dentist appointments, Tupperware parties and such. And one night, when she went on, a certain Michael Billington was in the audience. You can guess the rest. Charlie got a stonking review in The Guardian, and poor Mo was terribly upset, as her Tupperware evening had been pants. All she'd bought was some useless jelly dish. I waved to Aled, who was nervously fiddling with his tambourine, as Melanie Griffith walked on stage holding the winning envelope. Melanie looked $1 million, but she didn't half witter on about the dinky Loch Ness Monster coasters she'd bought that day in a pound shop. Thankfully, after a rather loud whisper of "Hold your wish, hen" from R2D2, she finally announced the winner. And yet again the award was given posthumously to Molly. Well, the sense of disappointment in the room was palpable, but we are all professionals and we duly applauded the sky with great gusto. I noticed that Ashley, Lindsay, Aled and Charlie were the first on their feet, which seemed incredibly generous until they started to walk briskly towards the exit, shaking their fists at poor Mel. So I guess they weren't so happy for Molly after all. The award was accepted by local spiritualist Jeffro Lee Swingle. It was terribly moving, as he told us that Molly was talking to him live from her cloud, and she wanted to thank everyone for their kindness and to urge us to keep buying the Rent-A-Ghost DVDs, as Vladimir, her beloved tortoise, needed the royalties. Then he said he had a bit of a scoop, as Molly had just confided that she was currently planning a comeback, as she hoped to be reincarnated very soon. It's true what they say, actors never retire. After all the excitement, we settled down for the evening's entertainment, and dear Billy Connolly took to the stage to read excerpts from Titus Andronicus in Gaelic. It's impossible to understand a word of the bloody thing in English, let alone Gaelic, so it was all blach, blach, blach. But Billy saved the day when he said, "This is hoity-toity bullshit, isn't it?" threw the script away and led us in a couple of choruses of his big hit, In the Brownies. The sight of Dame Judi Dench standing on her chair, skirt tucked into her knickers and screaming, "We want you, we want you, we want you as a new recruit," is something I will never forget. Next up was Scotland's very own songbird, Moira Anderson, who sashayed onto the stage in a sequined jumpsuit and amazed us all by singing all 16 minutes of French kissing in the USA. After about 10 minutes, we didn't know if she'd make it, but after a short intermission while she chomped through a bowl of porridge oats, she powered through. That voice is divine. Kiri Te Kilmarnock, I call her. It's just a shame she didn't do more R&B, but I guess Chaz and Dave got there first. The final act was the legendary Lulu, my one-time flatmate, who belted out a sweet medley of Donald, Where's Your Trousers, and something called Pour Some Sugar on Me. I loved it. But the cloakroom attendant said to me afterwards, "She wouldn't have won the Eurovision with that, would she?" Well, everyone must have heard, as all you could hear were shrieks of laughter coming from the row of cubicles. No one could flush for laughing, until suddenly the door second from the end flew open and out stormed Lulu herself, carrying an empty toilet roll tube and with a face like thunder. There's a lesson for us all there. After the meal, if you can call it that, a deep-fried Mars bar and locally sourced pommes frites is not my idea of using finest Scottish produce. JK and I caught up with the multi-talented Alexander McCall-Smith and his lovely wife Lauren McCall-Smith, then returned to our table to find a rather dejected Whoopi toying with her pudding. "This blancmange is rank," she said. I felt so sorry for her, coming all the way from Hollywood for a choice of that slop or prunes in custard. But by then we were all just desperate to get to the after-show party, and there was still no sign of David and Hannah. I could picture Hannah backstage saying, "Let them wait, pearls before swine, darling." Until finally David reappeared, looking very dapper in full Highland dress, and then, talk about a collective intake of breath, a shiny spaceship was wheeled on stage, and who should shuffle out, blinking under the startling glare of the lights, but E.T. "It can't be Hannah!" I screamed, but it was. What really gave it away was the exquisite Marc Jacobs handbag dangling from her extended glowing finger. "Phone home, my darlings," she teased the crowd as she pretended to dial us in from a trim phone. I've never felt so proud of her, and Sean said he could have done with those underpants now. It's amazing how quickly we got used to E.T. with a lilting Morningside accent, but even Hannah couldn't liven up the next award for Best Radio Play. Frankly, who gives a fig? Anyone can say, I am now walking into the bedroom. I am putting on my PJs. I am pouring from the tea's maid. You just want to scream, buy a telly, don't you? Then came Best Foreign Language Film, which went to Lorraine Kelly, A Life Well Lived. Best Original Music to Ed Sheeran with He's My Japanese Boy. John Barry couldn't believe his ears. And Best Hair and Makeup to Gloria, the senior stylist at the Copacabana Hair Salon in Strathbogie High Street. She only won because she's a close chum of Denzel's partner, Wesley. It's who you know in this business, as Nanette Newman once said to me. Truly, Glo is a hopeless hairdresser. She once mistook Whitney Houston for Amy Winehouse and gave her a dreadlocked beehive instead of a shampoo and set. Not that it didn't suit her, but she really should have asked first. By the time David announced the award for Best On-Set Meringues, the whole love fest was doing my head in, so I worked on the cushion I'm embroidering with just some of the famous characters I've played over the years. Willie Loman, Veruca Salt, the back end of Clarabelle the cow. I pricked up my ears again when poor Hannah struggled to read the winner of Best Newcomer, as she couldn't get her reading glasses over E.T.'s ludicrously wide-set eyes. After a bit of faffing about, David finally grabbed the envelope, stepped up to the mic and uttered the worst words I would ever hear. And the winner is Cindy Lou Redgrave McShoogle. It was like an out-of-body experience. What the hell was happening? Maurice had married the floozy. She's a working actress. She's won a Tartan Tammy. I'm Mrs. McShoogle. I'm an acclaimed actress. They never gave me one. I felt violated, and it didn't help when the crowd rose to their feet to cheer our so-called winner. I reached out to Sooty and said, help me, please. But the wee critter was too busy practising his magic tricks for the party and just waved his little mitts at me. I remember thinking, even Sooty can't help me now. And that's not a line I thought I'd ever hear myself saying.
Mrs. McShoogle, Scotland's second finest actress, starred Carolyn Pickles. It was written by Jonathan Fortingall. Sound by Norman Goodman. Song title is Funky Disco by Biz Baz Studio. It was directed by Colin Wakefield and produced by Yellow Brick Grove in association with Double Honours Productions. Book available on Amazon. Mrs. McShoogle is dedicated to Hannah Gordon, a truly fine Scottish actress.